Joe Biden has decisively won the delegate-rich Florida and Illinois primaries, Fox News projects, further cementing the former vice president as the dominant frontrunner in the race for the Democratic presidential nomination over rival Bernie Sanders.
Florida and Illinois will award a hefty 219 and 155 pledged delegates, respectively, meaning Biden will significantly pad his growing delegate lead from these victories.
Click for live results.
Polls will close in Arizona, which has 67 delegates to offer, at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Together, the contests are likely to only add to the pressure on Sanders to reconsider his presence in the race. Last week, he vowed to press on after a string of defeats, signaling he wants to continue to pressure Biden to embrace more progressive policies.
In Florida, a key swing state in the general election, Sanders was walloped.
Biden was ahead in the state by a massive margin of 61.5% to 22.7%, with 82% of precincts reporting. The rout was somewhat expected, with the state's sizable Cuban and Venezuelan American population largely resistant to Sanders' democratic socialist politics and many voters angered after he defended former Cuban dictator Fidel Castro's literacy programs.
20% of Democratic primary voters in the Florida primary were Hispanic, a group that typically has been a strength for Sanders. 6 in 10 voted for Biden, who received approximately two-thirds of the vote among Puerto Ricans and almost 6 in 10 among Cubans, according to the Fox News voter analysis.
Despite ongoing concerns about the coronavirus, seniors made up more than one-third of the electorate in Florida, the highest portion in any primary surveyed this year, the Fox News voter analysis showed. Biden easily won voters over the age of 65, with almost 8 in 10 supporting him.
Electability continued to play a factor in Biden's favor.
Across all states voting on Tuesday, voters said they believed Biden was better positioned to win in November. Roughly 83% of voters in Arizona, Florida, and Illinois felt Biden could beat President Trump, while only about 62% of voters in those states had the same confidence in Sanders, according to Fox News voter analysis.
Fox News voter analysis, full methodology.
Meanwhile, Trump easily clinched the Republican presidential nomination with wins in the Illinois and Florida Republican primaries, officially dashing the hopes of any of the extreme long-shot candidates who challenged him in that primary.
A total of 441 delegates was at stake in the Democratic primary on Tuesday, and the big question was whether the coronavirus would affect turnout at the polls. Some early indications were that turnout in Florida actually may have been higher than 2016 figures.
Biden is moving closer to securing the Democratic presidential nomination but had faced the possibility of a setback if the older voters who tend to support him didn't show up. Sanders, meanwhile, couldn't afford to lose support from young voters who have been his most loyal supporters. In the end, Biden did not appear to suffer any measurable loss of support.
DNC chair urges voters to cast ballots by mail.
Problems related to the virus scare still reportedly popped up across the country, including in Florida, the biggest delegate prize of the evening.
In Okaloosa County on the Panhandle, 24 poll workers dropped out, leaving supervisors scrambling to find replacements.
Millions of voters have already participated in some form of early voting. But there were some signs on Tuesday that voters, and poll workers, were staying home.
In Burbank, a small community southwest of Chicago, most of the voting stations stood empty at 8 a.m., the Associated Press reported. Only 17 people had voted, a pace that officials said was unusually slow.
In Palm Beach County, Florida, 800 volunteer poll workers backed out on Monday and just 100 new volunteers offered to take their place.
In Illinois, there was a push to relocate about 50 Chicago-area polling places after locations canceled at the last minute and said they would not be available for use on Tuesday.
Leaders in Ohio called off their primary just hours before polls were set to open as the federal government urged Americans not to gather in groups of 10 or more and asked older people to stay home. The state's Democratic Party said it was weighing options for challenging that move, which was pushed by the Republican governor.
Georgia has delayed its primary from March 24 to May 19, and Louisiana from April 4 to June 20. Additionally, Maryland has moved its April 28 primary to June 2, and Kentucky has pushed its primary from May 19 to June 23.
Progressives slam Perez as irresponsible for allowing primaries amid outbreak.
The Democratic National Committee, DNC, has reportedly warned that states that delay their primaries past June 9 could face a hefty delegate penalty, angering some commentators who call the ultimatum reckless given the threat posed by coronavirus.
The right to vote is the foundation of our democracy, and we must do everything we can to protect and expand that right instead of bringing our democratic process to a halt, DNC Chairman Tom Perez said in a statement. He is urging states to expand options like voting by mail in upcoming contests.
The tumult surrounding the virus has left the primary campaign in a state of suspended animation, but Sanders currently faces an increasingly tough path to the nomination. About half of the delegates in the Democratic primary have already been awarded and, with Biden looking at another big night Tuesday, he will pad an already large and perhaps insurmountable lead.
Coronavirus threatens to upend remaining primaries, conventions.
Sanders trailed Biden by more than 150 delegates nationally going into the night, meaning even at that stage he needed to win more than 57% of those yet to be allocated to clinch the Democratic nomination. The percentage needed to win grows even higher now.
The coronavirus outbreak and its impact on the primary calendar could only amplify calls for Sanders to drop out of the race, especially with Biden coming out of Tuesday night's primaries in an even stronger position.
Fox News' Victoria Ballara, Paul Steinhauser, and the Associated Press contributed to this report.